Hello, my name is Joaquin Chapa. I'm a church kid. I've been in church for 20 years, not by choice, no, just kidding. And so I've been in children's church since I was 14 years old. My dad was a pastor, and so when we came back, I got involved in children's church, and I'm going to be talking about that a little bit more. Let me try to lower this. Test. I'll talk about that a little bit more. I became a children's church helper when I was 14 to 18. And when I turned 18 years old, I went to go talk to Pastor Roman and told him that I wanted to become a preteen teacher. And so this is my ground. This is where I do preteens once a month. This past month, I did preteens 3 times. Don't ask me why, but it happened. And so I was in here 3 times this past month doing preteens. And so what preteens is 10 to 12 years old. Every time they come in, we're giving high fives. And every time they come out, we're giving high fives. And so usually when I do preteens, I like to get everybody's name because you'll want to build that connection with them. So what we're talking about today is worship, the importance of worship, what to establish within your church, whether you're a really small church or maybe you have a couple of kids already in your children's church, what we can do to build the foundations for worship. And so if you guys don't know, I've been in song service since I was 8 years old. When I was in my dad's church, I was playing the drums. I came back to McAllen. I got into children's church song service. I joined Teen Bible Study. I got into song service there. And I graduated to be able to play on the stage over here in the main service, worshiping God, leading song service, and playing guitar. And so I've been in it for a long time. For 12 years now, I'm 20 years old. And so we're going to get started. I want to thank you guys for making it out. I want to thank Robert for giving me the opportunity because it is pretty crazy. And so that's the introduction there. So what's the objective for today? What we're trying to learn, what I'm trying to teach you guys. You guys are probably thinking like, this guy just got out of children's church a couple days ago. What is he teaching me? But, hey, maybe I have a little bit of experience, man. I've been in it for 12 years. So, objective for today, teach kids the importance of worship, how to worship God, build disciples within your children's church, and practical ways, easy ways for your children's church song service to start. And so, let's get started. Let's get rolling. Last Sunday, I had the privilege to go to children's church and go talk with the song service there. And so if you guys don't know, maybe you guys are not from the RGV, here in our children's church just across the hall, our children's church is ran completely by kids, usually 9 to maybe 13 if they're lucky to squeeze in. And so our guitar player, he's within that age range. Our song service leader, just like how you guys saw last night and this morning, that's going on in children's church. And so it hasn't always been like that. And so I'm privileged to say that I was one of the first generations to jump into that children's church song service, right? And so when I came back from the mission field and I came back into children's church, the only person running song service was Mark on his keyboard and sometimes Robert with his guitar. And so all the kids would be running around, children's church, right? And then we would do worship, Robert on guitar or brother Mark on his keyboard, right? And so we didn't have kids playing instruments like we do now. And so it was a process. And so I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to dive into that if you guys are interested. And so let's start first with why do we worship? And so when I was in service on Sunday with all the kids on stage at their children's church song service, they're all getting ready, tuning their instruments. Me, 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 me. I remember we used to do that when I was in children's church. Right before we started, we would all tune our voices. So this is just for fun, right? And so Abby or Robert would go, me, 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 me. And all the girls would go, me, me, me. And then all the guys would go, me, 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 me. So you want to have fun in children's church. And so I'm over there, I'm talking to the kids, right? And the question I asked them, I called them all together, I got all the bands together, and I said, why do we worship God, and what's the importance of children's church song service? And so everybody started raising their hand. And so the way this works, when I do preteens, if you have something to say, if you have a question, we're going to do this now, you just raise your hand while I'm talking. I'll pick on you, and we have a runner back there. So let's make it kind of interactive. It's not just me preaching or talking. Let's kind of interact with each other. And so to begin with, I asked the children's church song service, why do we worship God? And so the floor is y'all's. Somebody shoot up their hand. Why do we worship God? Simple question. You can give me a simple answer. Anybody in here? Why do we worship God? Raise your hand and I'll have my bro Ethan over there give an answer. All right, taking the mic. There we go.
Because the songs are cool.
Because the songs are cool. For real. Why do we worship God? Maybe you haven't even thought about that before. My father.
To establish God's presence in our service.
Good. All right. That's a great answer. I heard that answer while I was over there. Anybody else? How about the song service leader?
I was going to say, because he's worthy?
Because he's worthy. That's a great one too. I heard that while I was over there talking. And so I was actually pretty surprised when I asked them that they had some pretty good answers. I was expecting some whack answers from the kids. They're like 9, 10 years old. And all their answers were pretty solid and biblical. And so the one that I heard the most and that I'm going to zero in on is to get God's attention and because he's worthy. And so, you know how Brother Tim over there was talking about the order of your service? If you don't have a song service, if you don't have kids to play instruments, you need to have worship. Whether it's like the way we did it over there, a cappella, whether it's just with the speaker, worship needs to be done. You need to have the kids understand that you're worshiping God because he's worthy, you're surrendering to him, and because he deserves it. And so when I was talking to all the preteens and all the song service, we were talking about why do we worship? A lot of them just kept on saying, because we want to get God's attention. And so I want to take you to that. Imagine God's up there in heaven. He looks down at this children's church, and there's like 45 kids in there, all with their hands raised. Would we agree that gets God's attention? They're singing their hearts out, right? They're crying out to God, all out of key, Jesus! And God's there watching them. And guess what? He's pleased with that, man. And so we do that because we want to get God's attention. Once children's church, we get God's attention, his presence comes down. What's next? What happens after that? Just like what Tim was saying, the sermon starts, whether it's through the puppets, whether it's through somebody coming up and giving a 10-minute sermonette, right? Something quick, right? God's presence is already here. You already have God's attention. Something that I was telling the kids is when we worship God, how do we worship God? Not like this, right? Like this, like this. And so what are we doing? We're surrendering to God. And so that needs all this, simple things like that. This is stuff I learned at Children's Church and is what I'm passing on to y'all. We don't worship God like this. We don't worship God like this. And we definitely don't worship God like this because there's something wrong with you. And so we worship God with hands raised because we're surrendering to God. The same way if a cop pulled a gun or anything like that, we surrender. Boom. Same thing. We're surrendering to God. And once you're able to surrender to God as a kid, as an adult, you're able to hear from God. It's a lot easier when you step into the message, when you step into the sermon, when you get to the altar call. Something that I'm always pushing. Altar call is important. You don't come to the altar during preteens and goof around. If you're going to do that, you go step back to your seat. Altar call is important because guess what? That's when you talk to God and that's when God can talk to you. And so all these things are just rundowns, practical things. And so let me think here. Here's a quick story. And so when I was in children's church, I remember being maybe 9, 10 years old, and they would let the little fishers in. If you guys don't know what little fishers is, it's 3 and 4 years old. And even at that age, they're being taught how important worship is. And so Sister Sylvia Sevilla, all the kids, all the little fishers would have their hands raised. If she saw you, you don't have to be mean about it. If she saw that your hands were raised, she would go stand behind you, and she would pick up your hands. And you would be like this during the whole service because Sister Sylvia Sevilla would be picking up your hands. And so things like that, it's a little funny. You don't have to be mean about it. But you know what? That shows the kids, you know what? This is why worship's important. We're trying to teach them. You know what? We're trying to get God's attention. We want to thank God so much because he gave us another day of life. We can come into children's church. So all that is reasons why we worship. And so another just practical thing. Let's say you have your children's church. Let's say you only have 10 kids in your children's church. You have your helpers. You and your wife are doing children's church. If you put on, let's say you put on a song, right? A children's church song. Let's have your helpers and the people who are in charge there, let's have them come to the front. The same way we do in children's church. And so let's say you guys are all the kids. Me and my helpers, part of the children's church, would come down and we would stand in front of you. And so when the music's playing, you guys are able to see how we worship. Because you're having kids come in from the world who's never seen anybody raise their hands to a song. To them, that's weird. You're having church kids come in who maybe they're just leaving Little Fishers and they're coming in. And so all this is all new to them. And so you need to set the example, come to the front, you and your wife, maybe just the wife, and show them. During the fast songs, we clap. We do the moves. Na, 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 na. During the slow songs, we worship God. We have our hands raised. Because a lot of it is just seeing and learning. That's how kids are. You need to be able to see that you and your wife or you and your helpers are worshiping God. You can't be doing. You can't have the worship and you standing behind them because they can't see what you're doing. They need to be able to see, you know what, brother so-and-so, brother Frank and Kim, they have their hands raised. Maybe we should have our hands raised during song service. So it's not even like drilling it into them. Raise your hands, raise your hands, raise your hands. Simple as you step into the front, the music's playing, and you raise your hands, and they're able to see that. And so that's practical. let's look. So that was the introduction to our objectives. Let's look at starting from zero. And so maybe you guys have nobody in song service. Maybe you have a very small children's church. I don't even know how long I've been going. One sec. Okay. Maybe you guys have a very small children's church, 5 or 6 kids. Let's start from there, because not everybody right now is at the point where you have 60, 50 kids in your children's church, right? All eager to want to get into song service. And so we already established that worship's important, right? And so if you don't have anybody to lead song service, if you don't have anybody, any skilled musicians at 8 years old, which is a rarity, right? A cappella or your speaker. Bring your speaker in, sing some songs a cappella. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how good it is, because what's our point? Our objective is we're trying to get God's attention. We're trying to teach the kids how important worship is, right? And so whether you have nobody there, establish worship in the beginning of service. And so just if you guys don't know, we have our fast songs and slow songs. And usually our fast songs, is like Brother Tim was saying, it's just for fun, right? We used to do this song in children's church called Peanut Butter and Jelly. Had nothing to do with Jesus Christ, but it was stinking fun to do. You would pick the peanuts, you would pick the grapes, you would stomp on the grapes, and everybody would run around. Once all that was done, we had fun singing Peanut Butter and Jelly. Guess what we did next? We sang Jesus Over My Soul or something like that. And so practical, your first songs are for fun, right? You can have, we do Father Abraham, the whole children's church walks around, na, Father Abraham, different things like that. Have fun. Once we get to worship, you want to kind of make the differentiation between your praise, your fast songs, and your worship, that the worship's not running around. That's when your hands are raised, you're surrendering to God. Does that sound good? Any questions so far? Am I moving too fast? Questions? Answers? Got it. All right. So starting from ground zero, if you don't have anybody, worship needs to be established, whether it be a cappella or whether it be with the speaker. Have your helpers, you and your wife, come to the front. Show the kids what we're doing. Once worship is done, you move on with your lessons, puppet shows, things like that. But you need to set the example, come to the front, show them what you're doing. Establish worship already. If you're not doing that, I encourage you, when you get back to your city, when you get back to the children's church, start it immediately. And so come to the front, show them how we do it, raise our hands, none of this, all like this. It's not like trying to be mean, you're just showing them, and you show by example, like this, we're worshiping God, we're surrendering to God. And so, story time. So how did McAllen get to where we're at now? And so, this all started when I came back from being a Pioneer kid. And so, I remember specifically Robert and Brother Abby, they were in charge of children's church at the time. Robert's still in charge. And so, we didn't have, as I was saying, we had Robert playing guitar, and we had Brother Mark playing keyboard. We didn't have any kids doing anything, and so all the kids would just be part of the crowd, right? And so something I talked to Robert about a couple of days ago was that I didn't know this, but they bought instruments in faith. And so they didn't know anybody who played guitar. They didn't know anybody who played drums, right? And so when I say buy instruments in faith, I'm not saying for you to go to Guitar Center and drop $400 on a super nice guitar. No. Go to your pawn shop. You can buy a guitar, an acoustic guitar for $40, for $35. And so go buy an instrument in faith, right? You put it in your children's church room. Buy a drum set in faith. Buy it off of Facebook Marketplace, however you want, right? Nothing too expensive, because things get broken, because that's what kids do. And so you buy these instruments in faith, and your children's church is able to see that. Hey, like, what the heck? There's a drum set now in children's church. What's going on? Or, my gosh, there's a new guitar on the stage, right? And so kids see that, and then they'll go ask. And I specifically remember when the drums came in and the guitar came in, kids started wondering, what's going on? Why is there a guitar on stage? Why is there drums on stage? And so little by little, we would have somebody try to play the drums. And so you guys know Pastor Eric, right? He was one of the first ones to get on the drum set. Didn't really know what he was doing. I was in the crowd, and I saw that. I saw Eric get on, and one of his friends try to link song service. And so that's how it was. It was either Robert playing guitar, one of the adults playing guitar. We had Eric on drums, and another kid trying to lead song service. And so that's where it all started. Little by little, traction started. And so something to consider is once one kid gets in, it's boom, it's going to start, man. When one kid gets on the stage, and all the other kids say, dang, look at Joaquin, he's playing drums. He doesn't even know what he's doing, but at least he's on there. At least he's trying. And so all the other kids see like, oh, I want to get a piece of that action, right? And so they see either me, they saw Eric, they saw one of my best friends on guitar. All of that caught the attention of all the other kids. And so little by little, I went up to Brother Abby and I asked, hey, can I join song service? I played drums when I was in the Pioneer Field, and I want to get in now. And so I got on the drum set, and now Eric graduated to leading song service, and then my best friend, he just started learning guitar, and he didn't really know anything. None of us knew how to play. We're kind of just banging around on the instruments, always playing wrong chords. Another thing, side note, your song service is never going to be perfect. There's everybody's going to be singing out of key. Everybody's going to be no tempo. It doesn't matter. We're here to get God's attention. And so my best friend's on guitar. I'm over there playing drums, and we have Eric leading song service. And so this was the beginning stages of what we have now. And so once this started, we started building traction. And so little by little, my brother Matthew, he was interested in learning how to play bass, and I had just started playing bass, literally like for 5 weeks. My dad, I'm privileged to have a dad who plays a lot of instruments, and so he had just started teaching me how to play bass. I was about 11 years old, and Matthew started getting interested, and I said, I'll teach you. And I'm over here, I only know like 3 chords, right? And so Matthew comes on stage, and I remember the first time Matthew played on stage, he wasn't even plugged in, but it didn't even matter. Everybody saw, dang, Matthew's on stage playing bass, and I'm over there rocking out on the drums with my best friend. This is for song service, right? And Matthew wasn't even plugged in. Doesn't matter, guys. It was that traction. Now Matthew plays bass for song service. He plays bass in our concerts, and it was this attraction. I showed him 3 chords, G, C, and D. That's all I knew, and I showed it to one of my best friends, and he picked it up the same way. And so this is practical things. Once you have one person get in, once you have one person, either you have a kid start leading song service, you either have a kid start playing guitar, all the kids after him are going to want to follow, because that's what kids do. They see somebody do something, and they want to try it too. It's just in our nature. And so that's how it started, right? Little by little, somebody else would get into song service. Something that I was talking to Robert about recently was that once a kid graduates from children's church, usually about 13 and a half, right? You're not in song service children's church anymore, right? You go on to whatever you want to do in the church, other ministries. An instrument is left vacated. And so let's say Jeremiah was playing guitar in children's church. Once he turns 13, he gets a little bit older, Jeremiah's not going to be playing guitar anymore, right? So guess what? This instrument gets vacated, and all the kids get to see, hey, you know what? There's a spot that I can try to get in, right? And so having the instruments on the stage is a pretty big thing, whether it's a $20, $30, $40 guitar and a cheapy little drum set, right? Having that gives the inspiration to the kids like, hey, I want to try to get on there. And so another thing is, once that gets rolling, once your song service starts, you need to constantly talk to your children's church song service, whether it's just a worship leader, and you need to constantly remind them why we're doing this. It's not to be a rock star. It's not to sing the best, right? We're doing this. This goes back to initially what we talked about in the beginning. Why do we worship God? And so that needs to be drilled into your children's church song service so they know, right? I'm doing this for the kids. I'm doing this for God, and I'm doing this for God's presence. And so let's look at some more practical things. Practical thing number 1, your song service needs to be fun. Choose easy songs and play them again and again and again. And so whether that's through a speaker, whether that's a cappella, right, or whether it's just starting your children's church song service, choose really easy songs. Easy songs are songs with 3 chords. Maybe you don't know anything about instruments, right? Easy songs are just 3-chord songs or something that can be repeated over, stuff like with the moves that we were doing over there, na 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 na. Right? Things like that, and repeat them. Because you don't want to be showing up with your elevation worship and all the kids are like, what? Everybody, the Holy Spirit, you know what I'm saying? Choose really easy and fun songs that we can repeat over and over again so people can learn. And the kids, once they know the song, right? Once you start your children's church song service, you've already played the song 5.5 million times. Everybody's going to know it. Everybody can sing it. That's not good. So that's practical thing number 2. Allow kids, this one's important. Allow kids to shadow in your main song service. And so let's say you have a bigger church, maybe you have a song service, right? You have your main song service, maybe it's just 2 or 3 of y'all. Allow kids from your children's church to come and sit down with them while they practice or maybe before the service. And so I remember a time in my life, I was probably about 12 years old, 11 or 12, and I had the privilege to go and shadow Pastor Alcala, who was the drummer at our time. And I didn't touch the drums. all I did was just sit next to him. And he would show me things, he would talk to me, like, oh, this is how you do this is how you do that. And so it was practical. So 2 or 3 of my friends, we would go to song service practice, the main song service, and we would just sit and listen, and we would just watch. And so that's important. Just how I was saying, kids like to watch, they want to be able to learn. And so just having those kids sit down next to another musician, a skilled musician who knows about the Word of God, who knows the importance of song service, all of that, have them shadow. And so another thing we already said was just buy instruments cheap, Amazon, pawn shop. Don't spend a fortune on them because I bet you will regret it. And so discipleship. Let's look at that lastly real quick. Okay, we're doing good on time. And so as I was saying, once you get this started, right, from ground zero, once you get that first kid in, it's a lot easier for other kids to follow. So it's kind of like a domino effect. Once one kid gets on the stage, somebody else wants to do it. And so I'm privileged to say that while I was over there in the children's church last Sunday, I was able to say, we're able to see how everything was running, and that from one of the first generations who did it, or the first generation to get into children's church song service, right, the same methods and everything that was being used when I was in song service is still being done to this day. And so I went in there, right, and I asked them, I was talking to them, and they do the same thing. The children's church song service, they get in a little huddle by the guitars, and they all pray for God to anoint their song service. That's important, because when I was 10 years old, we did the same thing. Me and all my friends would come to the guitars, and we would all lift up our prayer needs, and then we would all cry out to God right before we did song service. And this is important. The same way in main song service, it's always getting pushed, hey, you need to have a prayer life because you're going up there and you're asking God for his presence to come down. And so the same way, the children's church, when they were running song service, they would all come together and they would all ask God, God, we need you for this song service. And so other things I asked the kids was, what makes a good children's church song service? Or what makes a bad children's church song service? And so a good children's church song service to them, to the kids on the stage that I was talking to last Sunday, is everybody's worshiping God. And so that's just perfect. If everybody's worshiping God, if everybody has their hands raised, that's a good song service. What makes a bad children's church song service? If nobody's paying attention to your song service, nobody even cares about worshiping God, that means you lost it. If nobody wants to worship God, that means something needs to be really evaluated. And so a good song service is not indicated by whether your song service leader was on key, whether he did the song too many times or anything like that. A good indicator of a children's church song service, whether it's you and your wife with the speaker or whether it's you and 5 other kids on stage, right? A good indicator is everybody in your crowd, all your kids are worshiping God. And so I'm not saying everybody, they're going to have those one kids who don't want to worship. They're just going to be like this. But for the most part, having your kids worship God, that's a big thumbs up. If you can start having that, man, you're rolling. And so that carries on into what happens in the big church. And so for me personally, I got into children's church song service at 10, right? I started a children's church band at 11. So the name of the band was Next Generation, and so that was pretty cool. And we actually played for Harvesters, and we totally stunk, but it's okay. Everybody saw, dang, these guys are on stage rocking. Matthew's over there with his unplugged bass. Unplugged bass. And so everybody was able to see that. So I started a band at 11. At 12 years old, this is key. This is really important, and I did want to talk about this. I remember I was 12 years old, and my Uncle Augie and the song service leader, Ruben, right, they pulled me and my friends aside, and we went into the concert hall. And so it was me and about maybe 5 other preteens, 12 years old. And I remember specifically, we're all standing there, and they told us that we were going to be the next ones up. And so we barely knew how to play. We probably, between the both of us, could play like 5 songs with all of us, right? And so we were playing the same songs in children's church, Peanut Butter Jelly, King of Kings, Pharaoh. And I remember going into that concert hall with the 2 song service leaders, and I was like, gosh, and they're telling us, you guys are the next ones. You guys are going to be the one who's going to be on stage in a couple years. In my mind, I was just mind blown, like, no way. I didn't even think about it, right? It was just, I was in children's church song service, and here are the song service leaders coming up to me and my friends. You guys are going to be the next ones. Are you guys ready? Do you guys pray before service? Do you guys have a prayer life? Things like that. Seeing if we had the right attitude. And so at 12 years old, that happened. And I remember at 13 years old, I became a teenager. I joined Teen Bible Study Song Service, right? And I stepped into that. And once I turned 14, me and all my friends were about the same age group. We all joined main song service. And so just like that, everything flows. It's like a machine. Eric got in. Then one of my friends came in. Then Matthew got in. Then I got in. And so it's kind of like a graduation program. You get into children's church, you go into teen song service, and then you go into main song service. And so from the very beginning, when you're in children's church, you already know how important it is to have worship, how important it is to worship God, to pray before you worship. All that's already established while you're 10 years old. So when you step on the big dog field in the main song service, you already have a mentality, this is important. I'm not here to goof around. I'm not here to just play guitar and show off how good I am, right? And so that's what happened to me. And so right after me, everything is the same way, domino effect. The next generation after me, Brother Elias, who plays guitar now on stage, Brother Gael, who plays piano on stage, Brother RJ, they all followed. It's the same way. And after RJ, it's the same generation, which is those three guys over there who are not paying attention. No, just kidding. Those guys over there, they're the ones following after. Brother Jeremiah, Brother Raiden, all these guys are following behind the next generation. So it's a machine. The first kids who did it was me and my friends. It was never been done. We didn't have instruments. Robert, by faith, bought a drum set and bought a guitar. Somebody took the step, learned 3 chords on guitar, right? And then the next person jumped behind them. And so it's a well-oiled machine, the way everything works, right? From one generation to the next, an instrument is vacated, and guess what? That gives an opportunity for somebody in your children's church, maybe one of your kids, to try to learn that instrument. And so that's all I have. I'm going to open it up for questions. If you have any questions about song service, maybe songs that you would like to do, maybe talking about Ground Zero, anything like that, the floor is yours. Hands raised, and my brother Ethan will go ahead and take you the mic. Anybody in here have any questions?
One comment I'd like to make is, I know my son gives me credit for teaching, but he actually learned a lot on YouTube. And so that's a real resource. I actually saw him just totally excel, and also get a chord sheet or a chord book.
Yeah.
Always available as part of your things that you have up there, because the kids will always go to that and look at it, and they'll pick up the guitar and try to, especially with a chord sheet,
Yeah, and so having YouTube on there is the easiest way for you to learn chords. And so maybe your son, maybe you're not musically gifted at all, right? Maybe your son is interested in guitar and you can't show him anything, right? All you got to do is either lend them your phone with supervision, show them, hey, how to play a G chord on YouTube. If you have that $40 guitar, I bought a guitar recently, maybe about a year ago. It was $28 at Guitar Center. It was on sale, and it works perfectly fine, right? And so it's just a little blue acoustic guitar, and it works. And so look on YouTube, how to play a G chord, how to play a C chord. And so chords like this, G, C, D, and E minor, if you don't know anything about music, those chords, you'll play every single song in song service to just those 4 chords. And so you're pretty much set. And so having your kid just watch that YouTube video, how to play that key, and just let them practice, I remember I would go to my room and I would just practice. I would practice, and I didn't know if I was even playing it right. And then I would come back and I would ask my friend who played the guitar, hey, is this right? And so a big thing is teaching each other. The same way I taught Matthew, my best friend kind of showed me how to play guitar, and then I showed somebody else how to play drums. And so it's kind of like, it's sporadic, man. The way everything's able to work, you teach him. And so while I was in children's church last Sunday, I was asking them, like, oh, how did you learn? And it's the same way as me. Oh, Raiden showed me how to play these 3 chords. Or Hugo, who's in La Paz, Bolivia, he was playing guitar and he was leaving. So Hugo knew, hey, somebody needs to be able to play guitar. And he showed Raiden these 3 chords, and now Raiden's playing guitar. The same thing with Sean, who's in Laredo. Sean was playing bass, and he knew he was leaving when he got sent out, and he showed Liam, the Perez boy, how to play bass. And so it's the same way. Everybody shows each other, right? Learning simple chords. And once you learn the basics, it's a lot easier for you to catch momentum, for you to start playing a lot better once you learn your basics. More questions? Anybody? Surrounding churches, questions? It's almost break. I have 5 more minutes. So we have 5 minutes for questions, or I can keep talking. Anything in here? Questions? Let's see. So I have here, if you establish the importance of worship and start building and investing in young godly musicians. Sister Anais.
So you talked about a lot of things that inspired you. Can you share maybe something that was negative that you would say,
Oh.
I would have handled it a little different?
Oh yeah, specifically, I remember I made the song service leader cry during children's church, who was actually my cousin Gael. And so I remember we used to okay, so you know how I said you need to have those meetings with your kids, your children's church kids who are doing song service, right? It needs to be taught to them on a kind of just check in, make sure everybody's doing okay. Like they know why they're doing this. And so after a while, as a kid, you kind of forget why you're up there, right? And so I remember we were kind of a point in song service, maybe we were all about 11 and 12 years old, and my cousin Gael was leading song service, and he bombed it. And so all of us went to Gael, and we were getting mad at him, and nah, I can't believe you, nah. And he went to go cry. And then I remember Robert pulled us all aside, and he was like, that's not what children's church song service was for. It doesn't need to be perfect, right? And so I remember reflecting on that, right? And so you don't, like I said in the beginning, your song service is not going to be perfect. And so you do want to check in with the kids who are leading song service. And this is in any ministry, right? If you have any kids doing ministry, you always want to check in and ask them, hey, why are you doing this? You know, or like, do you still want to do this? You don't want to have the kids under this mentality, like you're forced to play drums. You know, you're coming here only to play drums. And so I would say check in with the kids, ask them the same way I did on Sunday. Hey, why are we doing this? What's a good song? Things like that. It helps the kids remember and remind them like, hey, I'm up here because I want to bring glory to God, and I want to bring the presence of God down. And so if I could go back, I would not make my cousin Gael cry because I felt bad after that. And so any more questions? Right here. Ethan.
What was it? On the guitars, I know there's certain guitars that you can use, because I know I got one, and the one from church, the one they use for service, is different.
Okay.
And I was like, why is the neck a little wider than the one in service? So I kind of have trouble playing it.
I got you.
And I want to teach the kids, right? But how would I do that if it's wider than the one at church? And they're like, oh, the one you have is for mariachi. And I was like, oh, okay. Am I buying the wrong guitar? Is there a specific one?
Okay, and so for anybody, let's talk about guitars for a little bit. So we have electric guitars, the ones that get plugged into the amp, right? Kind of like that blue, this is an electric guitar. And then you have acoustic guitars, right? Those are the ones, the whole, right? And they're hollow body. And so acoustic guitars, sometimes you tend to find that their necks are a bit wider. And so it is a little bit harder for kids to reach their hands around. It can be a little bit uncomfortable. Electric guitars here, you can see their necks are a bit thinner. And so a lot of different guitars, neck size is kind of, it varies. And so if you wanted to teach a kid guitar or something like that, look for a thinner neck. It's not like a matter of, oh, this guitar is wrong and this guitar is right. It's kind of just makes and brands, they have different neck sizes. And so I'm thinking the guitar that you brought is probably that thick. It would be considered a mariachi guitar. It's an acoustic guitar. It has the hole, right? Yes. Right? And so those are a little bit harder to play, right? You can always get like the smaller size guitars, and their necks are thinner. They have like what are they called? Like not like teacher guitars, or like student guitars, and their necks are a bit thinner because a lot of brands and makers know like, hey, it's kind of uncomfortable for you to learn on such a thick neck. And so student guitars, they're a bit thinner. It's a little bit easier to learn. So that is a good question. I would say if like, we'll be right there. Ethan, right here, buddy. And so I would say like if you're gonna specifically, maybe it's your son or something like that, take him to the pawn shop or the guitar center, and you're able to see like, hey, this is a little bit easier for you to grab, or this is way too thick. Especially if your son's really little, it's gonna be a lot harder for him to grab that thicker neck.
I want to go back to the question that sister asked you about and you made that your cousin cry. It is very important that I do ministry with children's church. I'm the leader in Austin Church, and I'm always encouraging the kids. I'm always encouraging you're either going to build up the children, because you don't know where they're going through, the struggles, even in the adult life. The people that are already in the ministry and everything. That one thing that you say might turn on, then they're never going to want to do anything for Jesus.
Yeah.
So you always got to encourage them to do something great for God. Like last night, my niece, the Alcala girls, they tell that their grandpa started doing ushering outside. Is he out there right now? It's got to be in you. You got to have a heart for that. Is he out there right now? Let me go say hi to him. And I went, but he wasn't there, and I go, oh man. So this morning I made it a point for me to go out there, and because is your grandpa here? Yeah, he's here. So I went out there and I encouraged, and I was talking to him and Adam. I said, man, that's awesome, that you're out here, And I said, yeah, I started learning how to tie my tie,
Yeah.
by Pastor Alcala that's in Chatumal. He was showing how to do it and everything on a video. So it's very important when you're going to minister to the kid, that you are always lifting up, always encouraging them instead of putting them down. And if they fail, like you said, nothing's going to be perfect. Let's say, I know next time you're going to get it. I know
exactly.
it, right? So it's very important to encourage the kids.
That's important. Yeah, always have that positive mindset. If your children's church bombs, it's okay. You know what? That's why I think it's important to check in with the kids, see how they're doing. You know what? You'd be surprised how many children's church kids would open up to you because they trust you. They're in there, they'll trust you. And so check in with your kids. We're already I went a little bit over. And so have any more questions before we go get donuts? Any more questions? Alrighty. Well, thank you guys for lending me your ears. And there you go.